Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Blue Jackets, in which the Sharks have won 3-1. So their second game and the second and final game against the Blue Jackets this season, actually the second and final game against the Blue Jackets just this week, and the Sharks take the season series 2-0. In fact, the Blue Jackets have actually had a ton of success here in their past 15 or 16 games. They've only have 2 regulation losses during that stretch, and both happen to be against the San Jose Sharks. The Jackets actually have been pulling off something that the Sharks are going to hope to do themselves. Just that prior 16 games ago, the Jackets found themselves a good 10-11 points out of a playoff spot. Currently, even though with this loss, they only find themselves a couple points out of the wild card spot. So Sharks going to look to do something similar. And this game started off pretty well for the Sharks. The first period, I would say, was Sharks favored, although it wasn't necessarily super one-sided. That first period did end 0-0, but come second period, we did begin to get some of that goal scoring. It would be LeBanc and Thornton putting the Sharks ahead 2-0 rather quickly. Late in the second period, it would be one of those late period killer goals as Milano would get his 5th to make it 2-1. But come third period, a period that the Sharks have shown so much improvement in these past few games, barring that last minute against Washington. And they once again show that. They get an early goal from Brent Burns to make it 3-1, and they hold down the lead. But not only do they prevent the Jackets from getting any extra goals in this game, but they do it while keeping some decent pressure and while playing a really solid defensive game. And so with the 3-1 victory, the Sharks get a much-needed 2 points and get back on track with their first game back home after a lengthy road trip. First thing to talk about would, of course, be Logan Couture. After the injury scare that occurred against the Blues just a couple days ago, we now have confirmation that he'll be out around 6 weeks, which is a huge blow against the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, I've mentioned multiple times that Couture has been one of, if not the best forward for the San Jose Sharks this season. He is also their captain, but the Sharks show up in a huge way tonight, really stepping up in his absence, and that's going to be something that needs to happen night in, night out. This isn't just a week off. This is 6 weeks off, and by the time he's back, it'll be around the end of February, which is around the trade deadline, which is going to be a huge moment for the Sharks of whether or not they decide if they want to trade off players like Dell, like Dylan, maybe even like LeBanc, and want to be that a bit of a seller, or at least try and retool a bit, or if they really are going to keep those pieces to try and make that push to the playoffs. We'll have to see where they are at that point, but Couture's absence might make it a bit more difficult. Luckily, it seems as though it didn't affect them all that much in this game. And just a small comment, I said that the Sharks are going to try and pull something like what the Blue Jackets have done in these past 15-16 games, but they also are in a similar boat as the Blue Jackets in terms of team structure. The goaltenders aren't the most reliable, and they're not players you would put the most faith in. Del Jones, Merzlikins, as well as Korpisalo when he isn't injured. They have a strong defensive core, the Jackets do have, but so do the Sharks, with a couple of big-name, high-scoring players like Burns and Carlson comparing to Werenski and Jones. And then the forwards are okay. There is some decent names there, although the Blue Jackets have a few of them injured, but nothing super high end. And we've seen the Blue Jackets have some success, especially recently. The Sharks are going to try and replicate that for themselves. Next, I'll talk about Aaron Dell, who once again gets the start here tonight, as it seems as though he's beginning to really pull the reins from Martin Jones. I've mentioned that before, and I'll say it again, and especially with this game tonight where, he didn't have to be insane. This was actually quite similar to maybe the game against the Red Wings a few games ago, although the Sharks actually looked good tonight compared to the one against the Red Wings, where, like Jones in that game, Dell didn't really have to do too much. He made a couple of good saves, especially in the first couple of periods, I guess. But, an average goaltender probably also only lets in about a goal in this one, maybe even less, considering the goal that he did let in was one of those common Aaron Dell mistakes. He gives this puck away behind the net, then Brent Burns gives the puck away again to Milano, and then Dell goes for an extremely aggressive poke check. Milano is able to avoid that and get the puck in, and it's something that Dell has had issue with even while he's been playing well in these past few games. You could probably, there's a handful of goals that the other teams have scored against Aaron Dell that you could really point to in terms of aggressive mistake by Dell, not necessarily a soft goal, but remember the game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, Hornqvist, as Dell goes for the poke check to try and prevent this pass. Hornqvist is easily able to push it past. The game against the Kings, that overtime winner where Dell jumps out aggressively to try and play this puck, and now here tonight with Milano. So it's something that Dell maybe needs to work on. It's not something they can necessarily take out of his game. He's going to be an aggressive goaltender. He's going to like playing with the puck, but he does need to maybe learn to control that a bit more. where he will have a lot more success if he can actually manage to do that, because he's already been playing quite well even with these couple of mistakes here or there. Next, I'll talk about Labanc, who had a lot of, responsibility shoved onto him in this one as he was put onto this first line, Kane, Hurdle, and Labanc. This is not a line we haven't seen already this season, as, sometimes we've seen Couture, Meyer, and Goodrow, and then this was a line that was together. It never really had the same success as it had tonight. Labanc looked very good. Both Hurdle and Kane were also quite strong. Labanc actually eclipsed 20 minutes tonight, where under Bob Booner, that has not yet happened. I don't know how many times it even happened under De Boer in just a regulation game. Labanc showed a lot of strong qualities here tonight, and hopefully that can't continue. As I said, players need to step up in the absence of Couture, and Labanc is a big one because he has been rather disappointing this season. We'll see what he can do moving forward because, as I said, great game for him tonight. And finally, I will mention the Sharks power play, which has been, I guess, on fire here in these past couple of games. It gets another one here tonight on Joe Thornton's goal. The second unit has really been showing up a lot more than the first unit. The second unit, of course, being Meyer, Kane, Thornton, Goodrow, and it seems Erik Karlsson in that regard. And it's not that the power play has shown so many changes systematically, although, as I said, I have liked what the second unit did. Their third power play in this game, one the Sharks that the Sharks did not score on, I thought showed a lot of promise. But maybe it's just a bit of that response to some of the bad luck the Sharks were having earlier. So even though I didn't like what the Sharks were doing on their power play for a lot of that awful stretch of 2-40 on the power play or 3-40 on the power play, even in a situation where you're not doing some of the right things, as has been mentioned multiple times, when you have the talent, you're bound to get a few goals here or there, and the Sharks really weren't. So maybe some of that bad luck in that stretch is coming back as good luck in this stretch, but maybe it is a sign of coming out of the woodworks here as the Sharks power play is potentially improving, which is nice to see and is definitely going to be necessary for the Sharks moving forward. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday as they will host for the first time this season the Dallas Stars. And of course, if you've been living under a rock, you may not know this, but the Sharks had their captain, Joe Pavelski, of course, get signed by the Dallas Stars in the offseason. So this will be the first time that Joe Pavelski will play against the Sharks in his career. I really haven't seen him in not teal ever at this point, and it's going to be a bit awkward. The last time the Sharks had one of these big, reuniting kind of moments was with Erik Karlsson last season, returning to Ottawa for the first time. And that didn't go particularly well. The Sharks lost that game 6-2, so hopefully this one will go a bit better. There will obviously be some sort of tribute to Joe Pavelski. It's definitely going to have some emotions flying from both teams, or at least from the Sharks as a whole. However, it's full steam ahead here for the San Jose Sharks. You can't dwell too much on that. You really need the 2 points, and so we'll see what the Sharks can do against Pavelski's new team. Class dismissed.